Welcome to the solution video for the Soda Machine Methods Challenge. Let's go to Visual Studio and get started. Now for you, it's probably been about a week since you did the last project in this series. For me, it's been a couple of weeks since I had a Christmas break in between. And so I'm coming back to this project kind of fresh and kind of having forgotten half of what I did here. And that's okay because we already wrote our unit tests. And so I want to talk through the process of what happens when you walk into a project you haven't done in a while and you're kind of trying to refresh your brain as to what's going on. And when you have unit tests, it's pretty awesome because let's just open up the logic we need to work on today. So that's the logic. And the first one is add to coin inventory. Well, what does that do? I forget. But if I go over to Soda Machine Logic Tests, these are my unit tests, I look at add to coin inventory and see what it's doing. It's okay, we're adding these 3 coins, and what happens is we add those coins, which is a list of coin model, then the inventory should have a quarter in it because we added a quarter. Now it looks like this test is expecting to see 6 quarters, even though I'm only adding 2 quarters. We have to look through and make sure that there's something unexpected here, but it looks like that there should be only 2 quarters in there. I'm not quite sure why we would expect to have 6 quarters, except for the fact that we probably, in our mocks, we probably did some work, and yes, we did. We instantiated this with some existing quarters. So we already have 4 quarters in the list, and now we're adding 2 more. So this is our data access, our mock data access. So it's saying we already have 4 quarters in there, so we add 2 more to it. So we should see 6 quarters in the list. But what this test is doing is not just walking through a logic of what should happen, it's also documenting for me what this method should do. Here are the inputs, here are the outputs I expect. So there is no direct output of add to coin inventory, but it should change the inventory of the coins, which kind of makes sense. So we should do something with these coin models to make sure they get into the coin inventory. So when we ask the data access for the coin inventory, there'll be 6 quarters in that list. So over here, it kind of makes sense that we do something where we add these coins to the inventory. Now, if we go to data access and look at our interface, we should see somewhere in here something about adding coins to the inventory. Probably right down here, add coins. And it takes a list of coins. So we already have something in place for our interface. Now let's do this. Let's, in our Soda Machine logic, we're going to create, actually I didn't even need to do that. I can just do our control dot here and initialize the field data access. There we go. And now what we have is this data access, which I'm going to maybe shorten this just to data or to DB. I think DB is probably better. So DB and control dot to rename that. So even though it comes in as data access, I'm going to rename it to DB. Therefore, it makes a little more sense, but yet it's still really, really short. So now add coins to inventory. I know what this needs to do. So it needs to say db.coin inventory add coins. Now, right now, that's all it needs to do. And I think that if I do this, that this should pass the unit tests. So if we build this, and if we go to our tests, and say, let's run all tests. And that should, it actually popped up a new window. Interesting. Let's pop this over onto here, like so. And let's expand this out here so you can see those icons. Some of the icons get missing. In fact, let's just drag us down to the bottom here. Gives us a little more space. So with this, there's an icon that says settings, and if you do the drop down next to it, it says run tests after build. And if you check that box, what's going to happen is every time you build, so build solution or Control-Shift-B, first of all, Control-Shift-B will save your files first, and then it will build. And once it builds, it will run these tests, and it will tell you how many are passing. So it's one step more, but that's essentially the same as what I'm doing here. It's just when I make a change here, and I hit save, then it's going to run my tests automatically for me. All right, add to soda inventory. Let's look at what this does. And notice also, it puts a green check marks next to my tests as well. And this is XUnit, so even though it's not Microsoft's thing, it's still working just fine. So let's look in here. Add to soda inventory. Notice it has these dash marks covered by 0 tests. And the reason why is because right here it's throwing an exception. And since it throws that exception, it's no longer evaluating any of these things down here. So the add to soda inventory seems pretty straightforward. So it should be that what I do is I say db dot, and we have probably a soda inventory. Yep, we do. Add sodas. And we have sodas. Like so. And if I save that, it looks like I just crashed my live unit testing. Let's see if we can re-enable that. I had a little bit of trouble with the tooling this morning. So let's go back to live unit testing and hit start. And it should be that this now has a passing test. Excellent. So, empty money from machine. Let's just look _db dot, and then we have a crash again. Let me just look at that crash real quick and see what the issue is. So I think a restart has helped. So let's try this again. So we'll see if it keeps crashing. If so, we'll work a different way. But empty money from the machine. So we have machine info, and is this going to be the empty cache, or is this going to be something different, like user credit? I think it's the user credit, and this is where naming could have been a lot better. So let's go and look at the test for this, empty money from the machine, and see what it's expecting. It's looking at machine info, and it's going to look for the cache on hand for the machine. So it is actually looking for the machine information. So with that, we can look at machine info, empty cache from the machine. And what this does is it returns back a decimal, which is what empty cache does. And it gives us back a value that is the money that was in the machine. And that has passed the test. And this is where it's nice to have this feedback of, yes, the test passes, which gives you more of an indication that you got your assumptions correct. Our one last time, we'll add live unit testing back up. Otherwise, we're just going to run the unit testing in place. And I'll do it like I didn't have Enterprise Edition. So get current income. So current income, I think the issue has something to do with code lens not working. Notice that code lens right here says loading references for this method, and it says Alt2, but it never actually loads it, and Alt2 doesn't seem to do anything. So I think that's the issue we're experiencing right here. And I'll probably submit a bug shortly just to kind of tell the users. In fact, you know what? Let's do it right now because this is a great opportunity to learn how to do a bug. So the next time this throws an error, I'm going to submit the bug. All right? Because there's a built-in way to submit a bug to the developer so they know what's going on and kind of gives them context around what you're doing. And I'll talk you through how to do that. It's a great learning opportunity. Okay, get current income. So that would be _db dot, and there's our crash. Let's do it right now. So I'm going to say upper right hand corner, send feedback. There's a little person icon with a message above their head in the upper right hand corner. I click that and say report a problem. All right, and that's going to pop up a box here and it says, okay, you've reported some problems before. Here's a problem you reported. Notice I've got some reports here, including these two have been submitted and fixed. And that's one of the great things is, okay, this one was closed as a lower priority. You know, for me, it wasn't a lower priority, but sure, I understand they've got hundreds to deal with. But for this one, they fixed the problem. So I found a problem in the T-SQL designer in SSDT, and they were able to resolve that problem and fix it pretty quickly. Now, here's one where I've submitted something, but it's been triaged, but that's about it. Now, it did hit over the Christmas break, and so you are going to get a slowdown over holiday periods where people aren't quite as responsive just because they have lives too. We have to expect that. So now let's report our own problems. So these are the current problems that I've submitted. Let's report a new problem. And the cool thing is it knows what version of Visual Studio I'm currently using, which I'm currently using the latest non-preview version of Visual Studio. So I'm going to give it a title that is very, very descriptive. And so I'm going to work a little bit on this title. I'll put a title down and see if I rework it or make it a little more clear. So live unit testing crashes. Let's leave it at that for now. So when working on my project, whenever I change the output of a method from, and it's the throw new not implemented exception, to real code right after I remove the exception and start typing live unit testing crashes. Okay, so that's the problem in a nutshell. That's what's going on, and I'm trying to be as clear as possible as what I'm doing, not just it crashes, because that's not really helpful. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do in a separate paragraph, I'm going to explain a little more about my situation or what things I've noticed. So first, let's start with what I have done. I restarted Visual Studio and I tried the preview version of Visual Studio. Neither solution worked. Okay, so I'm now saying, okay, here's what I did to try and test it. I also did a project rebuild without success. Now, is there anything else I did to try and fix this? I think those are the big ones that I did. Now let's talk about the things I've noticed. I did notice that code lens does not seem to be working for this file. It says that it is still loading and to press Alt plus 2, which seems to do nothing. Okay, so there's the things I've noticed as well. Now, I'm still not real thrilled with my title here, Live Unit Testing Crashes, because that's kind of generic, okay? Saying something crashes is like saying, something broke. It doesn't really help you explain the problem or what you were doing in the problem. And some of that comes in the description, but you do want to have some kind of way to indicate as clearly as possible what's going on in the title of this so that it's understandable and easily scannable. So when you're scanning through a list, just live unit testing crashes, that gives an indication of which team it's for the live unit testing team, but it doesn't give you an indication of what exactly is happening. Copy my title here. So I have this notepad now of my title and description. Notepad's great for these quick little notes. I'm going to close out of this. What I'm going to do is I am going to undo this. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to testing and turn live unit testing back on. And once it loads up, now we've got our live unit testing on. Now, if I come up here and I replace this with a throw new not implemented exception, it seems like that worked. Now, let's save that. And what if I come back here and said, well, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do _db dot, and that seemed to work. So empty my machine, let's remember what this was. This was machine empty cache like so, and return like so. And that worked. Let's try it again just to make sure. So soda inventories add soda. So come here, say throw new not implemented exception. Hit save. That worked. And then come back over here and say db dot soda inventories add soda. Add sodas. Like so. And that worked. So it's only when I come down here and I remove this exception for the first time, it seems like. And there it didn't even do it. So it's like it happens sometimes, but not every time. Maybe a restart helps. So get current income is the total income and cash on hand. That's probably not right. So current income, not quite sure what we're going to get the current income. We have total income, but I don't have current income. Let's see. So let's find out how to do that. So we're going to come back to the idea of submitting this bug report because it doesn't seem to be doing it right now. And let's even just undo this real quick. We're going to save this and I'm going to remove a different one. Get money inserted total. I'm assuming that's the user credit. User credit total. User ID. Return. So now we have a case where we have something that's a bug, but we don't quite know how to reproduce it. Okay, so let's close this out and let's open it back up. Let's come down here and we're going to do this one right here. We're going to delete this, say db dot, and now we have a conundrum because this wasn't working and now it is working. And I wonder if the issue was the first time it goes through, it crashes, and then it kind of catches up with itself. That may be the issue. The problem is I can't reproduce this bug. It's not something simple that I can say, oh, okay, here's what you do. So if I can't reproduce the bug and I give it to somebody else and say, well, it was a bug, I just can't reproduce it, they probably can't reproduce it either. Which means, do you know how hard it is to solve a bug you can't reproduce? It's almost not a bug. Because if you can't reproduce it, if all the time, if you can't say this is what you do and this is what will happen every single time, then there's no way for the user to fix it or the developers to fix it, because if they can't see the bug, they can't know that's resolved. Therefore, they're not going to work on it, because working on it would be actually counterproductive in a lot of ways. Because unless you can say, okay, well, I assume this is the case, or based upon your machine information, maybe there's a combination of factors, but even then, they really need to reproduce that bug. So just note that we're not going to submit that right now because we have not found a way to reproduce this bug effectively every single time. Okay? So get current income. We're going back to our code now. Get current income. We have the machine info where we have total income, and we have the empty cache and cash on hand, but I'm not sure we have current income. Let's go look at the unit test for this for get current income. So get current income down here, it's going to look at machine info, and it's going to say cash on hand. So that's the value that is the current income. Okay. So we just named it a little differently. So that would be the machine info, and it is the cash on hand. There we go. And now we get a matching unit test, or a successful unit test. So let's go to soda inventory and say return db dot, and this is soda inventory get all. This should give us all the sodas in our inventory. And that passes the test. Soda price. Well, this is return underscore db dot machine info soda price. Like so. And total income, pretty similar here. Return. And there's our crash. We just crashed live unit testing. So I am going to go back and submit this now, but I have a little more information based upon the information I've seen. Okay, so I'm gonna stick with live unit testing crashes. I'm gonna paste in my description, and it says when working on a project, whenever I change, that's gonna change. I'm gonna say when I change the output of a method from throw new not implement exception to real code right after remove the exception, start typing live unit testing crashes. Sometimes it was happening each time. Then after restarting live unit testing a couple times, it started happening only once in a while. So that's a little more information about my issue. I'm going to hit next, and I am going to include a screenshot. Let's first, you know what? Let's go back to our output, and let's grab this. This is our crash. Okay, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come back. Don't paste as a screenshot, please, because you know that it's hard to find information in a screenshot. You can't just read through it. You want to have some of those pieces of information typed out for you. So here is the crash output. And I've just pasted in that crash output. Supplied snapshot is an incorrect snapshot, and there's the information for it. Okay? So now I can hit next and record. So I can record my Visual Studio. I'm going to do this, and we'll see if it actually reproduces itself or not. So let's start recording. So started recording. I had a UAC dialog box there that popped up. That's why the screen may have gone black for you. So let's save this. Let's start up our live unit testing. And now we have live unit testing running. Cool. And if we back out of this and do db dot, there's our crash. All right. So now we can stop the testing. All right, just stop the testing, and now it's going to upload that information and compile it. So now they have a better picture of what's going on with my Visual Studio. Now it recorded just my Visual Studio instance. It didn't record my entire computer. It just recorded what Visual Studio was doing. But that way it gives them a better picture of what's happening in Visual Studio at that time. Now it may be that your particular instance of Visual Studio has some private stuff in there. I understand that. Your information will be kept private to Microsoft, and your username, title, and description will be public on the community. So this report right here is private just to Microsoft. So even if it's closed source software, even if it's something you don't want out in the public, I would say you can trust this and say this is just for Microsoft for debugging purposes. If your organization is really uptight about that and really decides they really cannot have anything going out to a third party like Microsoft, even though, again, there's protections and things in place, then I understand that you can't submit this report. But you can submit the other steps that I've done, just not this last one. All right, well, that's running. I'm going to continue working on this project because I don't need to wait for this to be done. So let's go back and re-enable our live unit testing. And now we have this. We can say return db, and then it crashed again. Get total income. So this is the total income right here. There we go. And what I'll do is I'm going to open up my unit testing. So under tests, we're going to say run all tests. And actually crash it into a different window. That's just awesome. I'm going to turn on that run tests after build. So we're going to run all of our tests here, and we have an unexpected error. That's interesting. So the recording process is not done, and I gave it some time. I actually paused this video, went away, did some errands, came back, and it still was trying to process the video. And so I restarted it, tried it again, same thing. And so I think the recording process is having an issue. So instead of going through the recording process, I've gone back, I've refilled this information out, and I'm not going to record my screen. Okay, so I'll skip that step. I'll let them know that the recording just wasn't going to work. It may be because I'm recording my video as well. I'm not sure. So I'll hit next, and it's going to attach a system log, so that's good. It's going to attach some information there, and no screenshots. Here's the information. This is the summary, and now I hit submit. Okay? That's all there is to submitting a bug. So I've submitted a bug and said, hey, I had this problem. it had some issues. If you can look into it, it'd be great. Now, hopefully they can reproduce it. But if they can't, then we'll have to either just let it close and until you can get it to reproduce itself more regularly, or can figure something else out. And so typically what happens is after I submit a bug, I try to reproduce it again and see if I get more information or more scenarios that might explain the issue. And so that's what we're going to do here. So sorry for pausing this video and going and doing that. And I'm actually going to pull part of this out probably and create a separate video with just the recording issues, just to kind of point out how to do this process, even if it doesn't work all the way like it didn't. But that way you can feel comfortable submitting your own feedback to Microsoft. But I've heard that this thing, well, you're a Microsoft MVP, why don't you submit it because you'll get hurt. And to an extent, there is a little bit of that because I do have access to the developers. I can talk to them directly and I can raise some issues and some back channels that you might not have access to. However, I say a little bit because the developers at Microsoft are not hiding. They are out there. They are looking for feedback. They're looking for you to help them make the product better. They're amazing. And so if you just are clear about your bug and you're clear about how to reproduce it, then they will help. Oftentimes I see people say, well, they just don't listen. And that's not true. But if you're not clear in what your issue is or how to reproduce it, then they can't do anything with that. And so then, yes, they will ignore it. They'll close it. They'll say, hey, can't reproduce, or hey, this is a low priority, or something like that. So it's on you to do some work. You can't just expect them to do all the work because they obviously have hundreds and thousands of people submitting bugs. And so you need to do some work to make some good work towards identifying the problem so it makes it easier to identify that solution. Okay? So that's just kind of a side road in this video. Like I said, I'll probably pull that out and create my own video from this, or a separate video for this. But I want to leave it in here because this is kind of in line what you would do and how you do it. And that's one of the things I focus on this channel is real world development. And real world development is rarely point A to point B. Often there is detours and side roads and issues that come up that you have to deal with, like this issue. And so you have to work through those issues. And so that's what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So now that we've got that out of the way, we've got the bug submitted for this, we've done our due diligence, now let's move on to the rest of the video. So let's issue a full refund. All right. So db dot user credit clear for user ID. And that's going to clear out that credit for the user. That's all we have to do. And notice it turns green. And yes, I did restart live unit testing. And for whatever reason, it's working now. I don't know if it'll continue to work or not, but at least for now, we're going to leave it running. So this return db.soda inventory get types. That's going to be the types of soda that are available in the machine. Money inserted, return db.user credit total. How much user does the user have? Money inserted. There we go, insert. So user ID and monetary amount. So that's going to insert a value into the user credit, but now that's a void. So what are we going to do here? We can't return that. So how do we get the value back? Well, we say return db user credit total. That's the new total amount. We have to pass in user ID. Okay, so that's a two-step process. And now this last one here, request soda. This is the tricky one. Now, so far we've seen just one, or in this case, 2-line methods, and that's all they are, which that's kind of cool. It's passing through and it's just doing 1 or 2 line things. But we are going to come back and do the bonus part of this challenge, which is to make these work through what happens if you give us bad data. Because right now, this is all happy path. And you've heard me say it before, but the happy path is if everything goes right, what's going on. But we haven't talked about things like what if they insert a wooden nickel, or what if they insert a coin that's not from the area we're in. So we're in the United States. I'm in the United States. So therefore, I'm expecting nickels, dimes, and quarters. They put a penny in. That's still U.S. currency, but I'm not accepting pennies. So therefore, that'd be a problem. Or if they put in a euro. Well, that's not from the U.S. either. Even though it's valid currency, it's not valid currency for the U.S. Therefore, we're not going to accept that either. So we haven't talked about those things. We'll get into those things. And therefore, these methods will flesh out a little more. But down here, this method's going to be a little bigger already because of the fact that when we request a soda, there's multiple different things that can happen. In fact, let's go over to our these four kind of give us an indication of what this method should do based upon the different scenarios. So let's start off with the simple one. It should return soda with no change. Okay, so let's start off by checking the amount if, and let's check the user total credit. So let's grab this and put in a temporary variable first. So let's var, I think it's decimal, user credit equals db dot user credit total by user ID, which we don't have. Interesting. So we've got a request for a soda with a soda model, and I don't believe the soda model has, it is not, a user ID. So we're not passing through everything we need in order to determine if this person can get a soda. So we found here a bug in our tests. All right, so let's solve this by first commenting this out and throw new not implemented exception. Not implemented. Where are you? Not implemented. There you go. Okay, so that goes back here. Now we have our failing unit test again, but let's go back over to our logic. We need to pass through the user ID, which I believe we have here because we have user 1 up there and we're passing that into money inserted and that's being passed through. Down here we have user, but we're not actually passing through to the request soda that user information. So let's come back over here and we're going to ask for the string user ID, which is going to break our interface. So let's save this and let's go to the very top. Actually, let's just go over Explorer and find it. Go to the very bottom here. Actually, it's right there. It's not the very bottom. And we'll paste it in. There's our update to our interface. And now, notice it has these dashes covered by 0 tests. And the reason why is because now our tests are incorrect. Because they're not passing in all the information they need. We need to pass in user, which we do have. So user and user. And down here, one more time, user. Oh, down here, one more time. There we go. So now we should have our tests back the way they want, the way they're supposed to. They're all failing. That's good for right now. We can comment out. Let's just comment it out instead of deleting it for right now. I am going to uncomment the user credit. Oops. And it says there's a build error. No, I don't want to succeed. I hit the wrong button here. Okay, so we got the user credit now. That's correct. And we also need to get the amount a soda costs. So decimal soda cost equals dB dot, and we need to get the machine info soda price. There we go. And now say if user credit is greater than or equal to soda cost. That means we're allowed to make the purchase. Okay, so a purchase can happen if the user has enough credit. Okay, and let's put the space down here. We're going to say else, and some of you have asked before, I've said it before, but I want to say it again here. If you type else, but notice how IntelliSense comes up, and if I hit tab twice now, it fills in the curly braces as well. So just note that's how I'm getting those curly braces so easily, is using a snippet. Okay, so this would be if the user does not have enough credit. All right, so let's create an output variable, and this is the variable's name is output. And now what we can do is say output equals null for the soda. See if we need to have any change. So I'm going to say if, now I could have done a 3 if statement here. I'm kind of thinking I should do that. So I could say if it equals soda cost, and then do an else if like this, and say user credit is greater than soda cost. I think it's a little more clear. Now we have 3 different sections. Okay, so now we can delete out that comment and put it maybe inside here, or I sometimes like to do it at the end if I have enough space, where we say no change needed. And then down here we could say change required. And this one is not enough money. It's very clear what all 3 of these mean. And if it's already clear to you, that's fine. You don't have to put the code comments, but I think that is a little clearer sometimes. Okay, so the credit is going to be nothing, but we do need to get a soda. So let's look at the DB list to see if we can get a soda. There, right there. Get soda based upon a soda model. Cool. So you pass in soda, and that's going to get us back a soda. So with this, we're going to say, let's just say var for right now, soda to return equals like so. Now it's going to give us back our soda. And then we're going to say output equals, the first value is a soda, so that's soda to return. The next value is a change, which is null because we don't have any change. And the error message is an empty string. So now we have our second possibility, which is that this is this is going to be a valid soda with no change and no error message. Now, just in case we had some kind of weird issue, let's go ahead and initialize this output to be null, null, and an unexpected error occurred. Like so. And now we should see that we have probably some passing unit tests. Let's find out. So if we come over to our unit tests and look, and it looks like for the should say not enough money, it's going to go through and it says request should say not enough money. Okay, well, we think that works because if you come through and say user credit is not equal to soda cost, it's not greater than soda cost, therefore we're going to get this right here and return output, it's still saying this is failing. So let's find out why. So here we're doing a null check. First of all, is soda null? Well, yes, it is. And then is the user credit going to be equal to what it was? It should be. The cash on hand should not have changed. The total income should not have changed. And the error message is null or white space is false. It should be false. And the change count, equals 0. So instead of saying equals 0, I should be saying equals new list of, whoops. Yep, that's right. New list of coin model. Like so. So that should be what we have for our second value. But it's still saying we have an error. So let's find out why by debugging this test right here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put my breakpoint right here, and then I am going to debug this test. Okay? So I'm going to say, let's debug tests. I could debug just this test, but I'll just debug all tests is fine usually. It depends how big your project is. All right, so we've got our initial state. Machine info says, and it's hard to see, so let's look at our locals window. And this is da.machineinfo. Machine info says soda price is 75 cents, cash on hand is $25.65. Total income is $201.50, and that's all we need. So now our user credit. So da.user credit. All right, which right now we have no user credit. So let's go ahead and skip over to here. And so now in our locals window, we should see user credit of 1. And for this person, we have a value for test of 50 cents. So we're going to request soda from this for this user test. And the expected soda is a Coke occupied in slot 1. Let's skip over this. And the results are, let's look at the results real quick. Local window. I can just pin this. I can unpin that. And there we go. Let's look at our results, which we can scroll here. I'm going to scroll or make this a little bigger. Results. Results, null soda, null change, and did not provide enough change is our error message. So it says null here for change, but even though I said equals new, I thought I said equals new. No change needed equals new list of coin model. So I'm interested to know why that says null instead of a new list. But that might be our issue. So assert null results.soda. Well, results.soda is null, so that should assert correctly as true. Assert equals the user da.user credit for the user is 0.05, and that should be true as well. All right, and now our initial cash on hand. Well, our initial state dot initial cash on hand. So let's look at cash on hand is 25.65. And let's just mouse over it. I'll read it for you. 25.65. It's the same. Total income 201.50 is 201.50. So those should be the same as well. Error message is null or white space. Result should be false. Assert.false, and that should be correct. So result.change.count. Well, that's saying that the change is null. So there's our issue right there, I think, is that results.change is null. So we can't have a .count on our results. So let's hit stop here, and let's go back over here and find out why we don't have a proper value here. So it looks like it should work. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a rebuild, just to be sure that this is not a tooling issue. Okay, so we're going to find out if there's a problem here. It says unexpected error happened. I don't see any errors occurring. So let's do a rebuild again and see build all succeeds. And it's still giving us this error here saying new list of coin model. So let's do this. Let's just verify by changing this right here. We're going to copy this and also paste it up here in our initialization. That didn't change anything. So let's first comment out that one line and see if this is technically the issue. Yes, it is. Notice everything else turns green. So there's one line here that says change.count. Well, it doesn't seem right to return back an empty list necessarily, except for the fact that if this succeeds, if I pass back a soda properly, then I am going to check the change, and if the change is null, it's going to throw an exception in my code unless I check for that as well. That's a little messy. So let's do this right. What I'm going to do is I am going to set this back to null because there's another issue here. And here, I'm going to try a separate variable first. Var test equals new list of coin model, like so. And then I'll pass test in here. And it still returns null. And let's try that just to see. No change. Now if I pass back a, well, honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure why this is nulling us out. I'm thinking it has something to do with being a tuple, because it should be that it passes back the instantiated list, which is empty. So if I did something like this, where I said test.count, that should return back 0. So I should be able to say, let's do this. Let's just do console write, test.count. If that was null, it would throw an exception at this point. Ah, you know why? No, I don't know why. So it says non-invocable member list coinmodel.count cannot be used like a method. Because it's not a method, it's just a property. But that should work. So if I put my debug breakpoint right here, and I were to go to debug tests, when it hits this, it should tell me that test.count is 0. Let's try this again. Debug tests. It's running. Okay, so once we hit this point, it says value cannot be null So let's go to get soda. This is request soda. Request soda with no change. And we're going to say debug on just that test. All right. And now if we look at the test.count. So test.count, notice count equals 0. So that seems to work. So this is not passing back. If I were to step over this, this is not passing back a null value. It's passing back an empty list, which is different. Let's step through though and see what we get to next. So if we go to the next step and look at results, we should see that results for the change is now saying the count is 0. Well, that's good. So the name of the soda should match. They do. The slot occupied should match. They do. The user credit, the user credit is not equal to 0. We haven't cleared out our user credit. So it looks like we actually had a problem because we were not clearing the user credit, and that was part of the issue. So that null issue, I'm not sure that was actually an issue. Maybe, let's say before, a red herring. So let's do this. Let's clear out this test code here. And let's leave this test code right like it is, and let's clear out that user credit. So if we get the soda return, then we're going to say db.userCreditClear for the user ID. Because we're going to clear it because those soda costs are equal. All right, so now I've cleared that, and it's still throwing an error for us. Let's find out why. Okay, so we'll go back over here, and we'll look at the cash on hand. We did not increment the cash on hand. So we need to make sure that we do all these steps. This is where the documentation of your unit test really helps. So cash on hand and total income need to be incremented. So db dot, that's going to be soda machine cash on hand plus equals, and let's get our user credit. And remember, we saved this value up here because now we can use it down here without having to access it because we just cleared it right there. All right, so cash on hand, whoops. We can't do a cash on hand plus. We can't operate on it directly. We have to do work on this. And I don't think we have a method to do that. We're going to have to add a method to add to our information. So we have our coin inventory, which that's not going to help us. We have our machine inventory, which is total income and cash on hand, empty cash. We don't have a purchase soda. So we have add soda, we have get all soda, we have get soda list, we have, or get soda, a specific one, and then get types of soda. And user credit, we have deposit, clear, insert, and total. We don't have anything for probably soda inventory purchase, where we actually make a purchase for soda. All right, so we're going to need to do that next. So let's do that. Let's modify our interface to allow for that additional call. So I think that it makes most sense to say we've got a soda inventory. We have maybe make a purchase soda method where we pass in the amount they purchase. Remember, we're passing in everything because we are going to, if there's more money, let's say they have $1 in inventory or $1 in credit, they make a purchase for 75 cents. They're going to quarterback as change, but we're going to still deposit that full dollar. And the reason why is because our withdraw coins is going to take care of the change back. So therefore, we're going to have our purchase be everything. So let's do this. Let's add a void down here. Machine info, add purchase, add income. And what that will do is that will add income to the cash on hand and the total income values. We're going to put in machine info and not attach it to, like, say, get soda. We want to have two separate events. And the reason why is I want to have as much separated logic as possible. For instance, what would happen if we decided to give a free credit somewhere? Well, we'd have to say the purchase was 0, and that's a little messy. So I think that separating these two out makes the most sense so we don't have overly complicated methods in our data access. Our data access really should be do this, like save this, or get this. That's really all it should be. It shouldn't be here's all this logic for how you do this series of events. So we're just going to have an add income. We may collapse it later into get soda, but I don't think we will. That's a question that I'm still wrestling with, but you know, the issue here is, do we ever add income where we don't get a soda? I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is no. So in that case, I think we do put it into get soda. So let's just save this. Let's go back to our Solution Explorer, and let's go to our mocks and mock data access. And here under the soda inventory, where we have get soda, this is where we should make a purchase. So in this case, we'd have to say decimal amount. And there's that crash again. So if we change the decimal amount, and then we go over to our interface for the iData access, and we change the get soda or the get soda right here and add the amount as well. Now we're implementing it, and now we can say two things. One, we have to change the cash on hand, and two, we have to change the total amount. So let's look for those. Let's see where they are. We have machine info. So machine info has all three of those, so we can set those values. So let's say machine info, I should say var info equals machine info, like so. Then we can say info dot cash on hand, and say plus equal put the tests and turn live unit testing back on. Hopefully it won't keep crashing on us. And it should be that gets us a little farther along. And this is where having this ability to separate these tests out is good. And that's why some people say never have more than one assert in a test, because of the fact that you have this idea of failure. But really here, what this is going to do is it's going to tell us if we run the test that why it's failing, and it's going to say the issue is going to be right down here on this line right now. It's saying this line is incorrect. We're not matching our cash on hand properly. Well, let's put our breakpoint right here, and we're going to debug just this one test. So we will find that test and say debug it, and wait for this to run, and there's build errors. All right. If there's build errors, you can't continue building. So this right here is saying, hey, you're not implementing this correctly because the interface is incorrect. All right, so let's look at the interface real quick. I think that we have another problem here, total income. So it does not contain a definition for total income with no values. Let's find out why. If we hit F12 here, actually Control F12, I believe. Oh, won't even go there. So let's go right to machine info underscore total income. Okay, so let's go to our total income here. Did I delete one too many? I don't think I did. So let's continue to look at why do we have this error right here, get total income. I may have wiped that out accidentally when I may have overwritten that, is what I'm saying. I don't have that undo button there. So I think I did overwrite something. So let's go over to our mock data access. We'll come down here, total income. Let's grab this signature line. And let's come back over here and we're going to put this at the end of machine info. One more, there we go. So that should now build properly. Unexpected error happened, that's okay. Now this unit test is passing. So now we have a passing test for one of our tests for, let's close out the things we don't need. We have this test as passing. Should return so with no change. That's correct. Okay? And if we scroll down, I think all these others are failing. So let's look at the next one on the list. Should say not enough money. Well, I think that's what it's saying. But let's find out why it's failing. So it's saying it's failing all the way down here on change count. The reason I know it's failing here is because that's where the last red X is. And that should be the last thing it's failing on. Notice down here, the red X is all the way up here. So it should be failing on should say not enough money. Now, before I mentioned that some people say separate these tests out into separate ones so you can see what each one, why each one fails. But I like to look at this as a whole because if part of it works but not the whole thing, I want the whole thing to fail. Because a partial success is not success, it's still failure. That's why I put all these in one. I'm checking the complete state. And so if I had most of these working, well, I'd say, cool, I am most of the way there. When reality is my state is incorrect, therefore it's not valid. None of that should be valid. So in this case, the change count is probably saying null when it should say have a value. So let's look at what the not enough money. Yep, not enough money is null. So let's do this. Let's change the value to say equals new list of coin model, like so. And now that succeeds. So you've got success here on the coin model checking. And let's actually get rid of this extra line here. We don't need this extra line anymore. We can put this the same exact way. like this, and that should still succeed. So now we get a green check mark here saying this path worked just fine. Now, why do we not get a green check mark here? My guess is there's another case where the user credit equals the soda cost, but there's something else we need to return here, like there's not a soda in stock. That's probably what it is. So if we go back over here and look, these unit tests are passing. Now you come down here, should say out of stock. There we go. So if we ask for a soda and it comes back as not in stock, then what happens? Well, we should not change the user credit. We should have null for the soda. We should have no difference in cash on hand or total income. And we should have an error message. And our change count should be 0 because we're not changing the user's credit. So that goes in here as well. So what happens if get soda doesn't work? Well, I should probably return a null here, correct? I think that makes sense. Now, before I continue though, I am looking at this user credit clear. I'm wondering if maybe that's where the add to the inventory should go. I don't think it is because it's not associated with getting a soda. But I do want to talk this through a little bit, just so you have this in your mind. Is the user credit, it would seem like, okay, if we have a user credit, we can say clear and deposit that into total credits and into cash on hand. But what about the case where they push that reset button? We don't want to add that money to our inventory. We're giving it back. Therefore, we would not associate those two events in this one event here. Instead, I want to, when you ask for a soda, if it works, I want to deposit the credit at that point. You've withdrawn the soda from inventory. That's where you put the money in. Okay, just want to point that out real quick. Okay, so it's here where we need to say, hey, is this null? If it's null, we should not do this work down here. So if soda to return equals null, we know we have an issue. We know we have a problem where the soda is not in inventory. So we're going to say output equals, there's that crash again, output equals null for the soda and a new list of coin model for the coins, and the error message is going to be soda not in inventory, like so. And then we'll have an else here. And we'll have this code right here. And I think that should give us what we need. Let's turn on our soda inventory get soda right here. This is where we are returning that value. So we need to do some logic checks here. So we're going to say var soda equals, there's that crash again. We're going to grab soda from inventory. Actually, we're going to say output soda, like so. Okay. Now, we're going to move this to be up here. And then we're going to say, you know what? If, so let's surround this. So we're going to say snippet. Sorry, it's off a screen here. Surround with if statement. Oops, not snippet. Let's make it a little higher so you can see it. Right click. Under snippet, there's surround with. And this is under Visual C#, then if. There we go. And it made it a little harder to do those things. And that's kind of unfortunate. But there's only so much you can do in line. But if output soda is not equal to null, then do that. Return output soda. Okay, so therefore, now you have this check in place where we're not going to do the withdrawal, or actually we're not going to add to the cash on hand or income if we didn't give you a soda. And this is just changing our mock data access because we had a bug in it. So let's turn live unit testing back on. And with that, we now see that these 3 lines have green check marks as well. So we have this check in place for if the soda is null, meaning there's no soda to return. Now looking at this code, I do see that what happens down here is going to be very similar to what happens up here. The difference is just the change. That's really all there is. So what do we do about that? I think we need to refactor this to say greater than or equal to, and then just have a check for the change. And that'll be right here. Get change. Like so. We can get rid of this. And that's all we need to do is have this get change section. And then either way will be set. Now, this new list of coin model, we're going to change that. And I also want to change the fact that we're setting all of output every time, because that's a little messy. So let's do this. Let's set this up here to be new and have our list of coin model like so. And then we're just going to set the values for the things that are changing. So in this case, this is output dot error message. Otherwise, everything else stays the same. And this should work. Okay? And then down here we have our a soda return and our new list. Well, it's actually going to be the var change equals and then get change, something like that. And then from here, we're going to get this change and pass that through, like so. Okay, so a little bit different, but this way we'll get a change either way. And if it's 0, we're just going to return back a new list. And if it's anything else, then we will return that list with values in it. So let's create a private method here. Private list of coin model called get change, like so. And now that's going to work, and then this will work. All right. So now we just need to figure out how to get the change based upon our values. Now I do need to pass those values in. So decimal soda cost and decimal user credit. I'll keep the names the same because then I can just pass them in soda cost and user credit. Notice IntelliCode prompt me for those correct values because of the matching names. So now I can figure out how to get change from my database. So let's get this change method to work. Now we're going to do things in a way that's quick and dirty, pretty much. And that's because we're trying to get this code in. We've got the unit test. We can refactor as we go. We just need to get something in working. So let's find out how to do that. So let's start with decimal. Let's call it difference equals user credit minus soda cost. All right. Now, we're also going to have a list of coin model. We'll call it output equals new list of coin model. And we're going to say if, let's it's still a decimal. Actually, let's cast this to an int, because that's the number of quarters I should get back. Now, cast an int because I know that math.floor will round to the nearest whole number, which is an integer. Now, I am hard-coding my quarter here, my quarter value, and that's okay for now. We'll get to refactoring this probably in a different video, because this is already going quite long. So this is going to give us the number of quarters we need. So what does this math.floor do? Well, what it does is it says cut off any decimal. So let's just say that our user had a difference of 55 cents. So a soda cost 75 cents. They gave us $1.30 for whatever reason. The difference is 55 cents. Well, how many quarters should we return as change? We're starting the biggest value first. Well, they're going to get back 2 quarters because that's 50 cents. And we want to have the biggest number of quarters possible without going over. So 55 cents, we can only have 2 quarters. Well, if we said 50, our add range correct. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to trust this works for now. We're going to put a test in just a minute for invalid values or not enough change. But for now, we're going to do this. And we're going to say next we need int dime count equals, and then follow the same pattern, math.floor for the difference divided by 0.1 m. Now, we have a problem here. We still need to figure out how to change this difference. And that's going to be based upon difference minus equals, there we go. And we're going to need to say quarter count times 0.25 decimal. And we're going to subtract that from our difference. So if you have 2 quarters and you multiply them by 0.25 each, that gives you 50 cents. Subtract 50 cents from our difference. And our dime count is going to be how many dimes we now need. And now we can say the same pattern here. Let's just copy it and then just change it. So we'll draw coins. This time we're saying dimes, and this is the dime count. And this is the dime count. And make sure we change this to 0.1. Okay, so there's our difference has been changed again based upon the dimes. Let's do the same exact thing. I'm going to copy this one right here. I'm going to paste it down below, and that's going to be for nickels. Nickel count. And so let's change this, and we're going to say 0.05 instead of 0.25 everywhere. And let's read through and make sure we have our values correct. So we have nickel count, we have the difference with 0.05. We're adding the range with draw coins that are a nickel and say how many we need. And the difference, we're going to subtract that. We should get 0 back as our value. Now I think what we'll do is right down here, we're going to say if, whoops, I put my cursor in the wrong spot. There we go. If, and we're going to say if difference is greater than 0, throw new exception. And this exception is going to say could not make proper change. Like so. So now we should because we're not getting the correct number of coins when there's not enough coins in stock. So let's make some changes so that we can handle that. And that comes down here where we are saying, okay, if we don't have the right coins in stock, what do we do? Which we don't have a unit test for. And we also not saying what happens if there's not enough of one coin, we can make it up with a different coin. So let's put a little check in here for each one of these. So when we withdraw this, we're just chunking it right into add range. Let's wait on that for a minute. And let's say, let's have a variable here. Let's create up here, I guess. And this is the list of coin model. You know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it right in line. I'm going to say var quarters equals like that. Okay? And we're going to add this to our range, but we are going to say quarters dot count. Okay? Because this is only telling us how many quarters we actually got back. And that's how nickels equals like so, and then we'll say nickels. Okay? And that should give us the alternate change we need. Let's test this out. We're going to start our live unit testing. Oh, we got a bad bit of code up there. I'm not sure why we had that extra closing bracket there. But now it looks like, if we go back over here, we've got passing unit tests for should return soda with alternate change. So we didn't have enough quarters, but they removed all the quarters, but now we still have the correct change. So it looks like we actually have a method that has all the tests passing now. Okay. Now we do know that this right here is not covered by any tests. So what happens if there's not enough change to give back? Well, let's come back up here and look at our logic. All right. So if we get the change, we should wrap this in a try catch, because there may be an exception here. So let's change this. Let's Control X and put a try here, and then we're going to catch this exception, and we're going to paste in the code. We're not going to rethrow the exception. And instead what we'll do is we will have a different return value. So first of all, we need to replace the soda in inventory. Okay? So we've already taken the soda out. So we need to put it back. But before we do that, I am noticing that I don't have any failing tests. So if I don't have any failing tests, how do I know that the code, the logic that I write is correct? I don't. So let's come over here and look at a test. Let's grab a test like this. I think this will work. And let's paste it down below and say, should say, instead of out of stock, should say not enough change. Something like that. And we're going to ask for, actually we need to ask for a correct soda. So let's ask for a Coke in slot 1. We know that that's valid. A Coke in slot 1. And we're going to request the soda. And then the soda coming back should be null. And the user credit should be the same. The cash on hand should not change. And the error message should not be null. Okay, you should have an error message. And the change count should be 0. Okay, so really it's pretty much the same thing as the soda not being in stock, but this time we're saying, hey, I can't make valid change for you. So let's go ahead and make sure that that's true. What we need to do for that? Well, we need to change the amount of coin inventory. So we're going to say coin inventory clear, not count, clear. And what that'll do is it'll take all the coins out of the inventory. And if there's no coins in the inventory, you shouldn't be able to get coins out. Kind of makes sense, right? So with that, let's go ahead and change this. So if we have an exception, then we're going to change the output dot error message. We crashed again. Hallelujah. Equals there is not enough coins to give you change. Like so. And now we have our exception. And we can hit save. We actually don't even have to catch this exception if we're not going to check for it. But we really should check for it and make sure it's the correct exception. Let's go ahead and turn our live unit testing back on. And this should work. And since it's not working, then we've got an issue. Let's find out which of our tests is failing. Not enough change is the only one that's failing. And it's saying, hey, the soda should be null, and it's not. So let's go over here and check why the soda is not null, because it should be that the output dot soda is null. And we should be getting this based upon throwing the exception when this occurs, when the difference is greater than 0. Debug this test. So we'll run just this test and debug it and see what happens. And it should be that it hits that breakpoint. We can see the values. So let's step into this. And we're going to get the change. So we will step over. The difference is going to be, $0. So it's actually our test problem. And the reason why it's our test problem is because we said 75 cents. Let's make this $1.75 is what the user has in credit. And let's save that. And now let's go back here. Actually, let's go back and run this test again and make sure we have our breakpoint in place. We do. And our initial cash on hand should now be equal, but it's not. Well, why is that? Because we actually have a logic issue. And the logic issue is that when we withdraw a soda, so let's look up here at our code. When we withdraw a soda, and that happens right here, then we then come back through and say, okay, now that we've withdrawn it, let's put this user credit into our inventory of cash on hand. But the problem is that we actually can't do that because we're returning the soda. So this unit test has actually exposed a logic issue in our code because we found out that No, I think we're going to return a soda itself. We could return a Boolean saying yes, it's in stock, but I think the full soda model is good because then it will give us the ability to read the other values. The downside of that is the user could accidentally use this method and so think that they've withdrawn a soda when they actually haven't. So let's just make it a bool. That way there's a clarity here to say yes or no, it's in stock or it's not. And we're going to ask for a soda model. So with that, we actually have to implement that in our interface, so our mock data access. So we'll have to implement down here. Let's implement it below this, where we say public bool, and then at the end of this, like so, what we're going to do is we're going to do basically the same logic as this. First to default, and we're going to copy this, paste it, and say, let's just say output soda. Well, yeah, output soda. If output soda is not equal to null, actually, we can just return this. Like so. Return output soda is not equal to null. And what that will do is return back a true if it's not null, a false if it's null. And then what we can do is over here in our code, instead of having this var soda to return, we can cut this out, or actually copy it for right now, and come down here and paste it right here, right before we clear the credit, after we have checked to make sure the change works. And then up here, we can say, instead of soda inventory get soda, we're going to check if soda in stock, not pass the credit, and say bool soda in stock. That has crashed again. Again, that's okay. So if soda in stock equals false. And now with this, we're doing the check and making sure we can get the soda, which is all we cared about up here. And if we can get the soda, we're going to make sure we can get the change correctly. If we can, we get the soda, we clear the credit, we return the soda and the credit, the change, and no error message. All right, so now let's turn on our live unit test. And then do a build here. So let's look at my output window real quick. All succeeded. And now I should have, let's run all tests again. And that's saying it's got an error. And if we go to the output, if you choose under output, normally it says build, but if you choose the tests down here at the bottom, then you can see what's going on. And it looks like we have an invalid operation exception. The test container was not found for .NET Core 3.1, so machine library.test.dll. It looks like there's some kind of weird issue with my unit test going on, and it probably has something to do with .NET Core. Not positive. Let's run all these again to see if this changes. It does. Okay, so I had to change to release mode, and that may actually help my live unit testing as well. Give it a shot. See what I said about trying different things and see what happens? So now I have 19 tests passing. Okay, so they're all passing. I get all green lights. Therefore, it looks like I've tested all of my code. Now, this really wraps up what we were talking about with the bonus challenge as well as the primary challenge. So the primary challenge was to implement all these methods. And we did that. We implemented all these methods. Normally, they were pretty easy, something like this. Now, this method was a lot more work because there's a lot more logic in this method, a lot more business logic. Now, the bonus challenge said, hey, don't forget to handle exceptions and data validation in your methods for some edge cases. And we did that in this method. Now you could go further. We could check for, like I said, European coins in a US-based machine or vice versa. We could check for those kind of things. We could also check for a little bit more with null issues, like what if they pass in no user ID? What do you do? But I think that we've done enough of an example in here that we don't need to go any further with that. So I think we've got all we need to our methods. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll make sure to get the source code to you. That'll be in right below the video. This had a little bit more addition to it besides just this testing challenge. We did go through and submit that bug, and we had some problems. My guess is it had to do with release mode. And by changing release mode, I bet that live unit testing will start to work now. It's probably some weird issue with debug versus release, and release not getting updated if you're in debug mode. It's just my theory at this point based upon what I've seen and based upon what the Test Explorer did. But you get to see that, so you get a little extra for that. Hopefully you enjoy this. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of it, and you've seen how unit testing can really help your code development. Because I would have missed a lot of those errors if I hadn't first sat down and said, what are the inputs and what are the outputs? And because I said, what are the inputs and outputs, I now knew what I should do when it comes to writing my methods. And when it didn't work, I said, oh, the test must be wrong. And I found out, oh, wait, the test isn't wrong. It's my logic that I messed up. And so that's a really powerful benefit of unit tests and having unit tests written first, because you know those inputs and outputs, and you're checking for those things separate from your code. Now, if you already have your code written, don't despair. You can still write unit tests. You can still sit down and say, what are the inputs and what are the expected outputs? And if you do that, you will still have good unit testing. You may still find a lot of those bugs, if not all those bugs. Just don't cheat. Don't look at your method and go, oh, okay, this is what it's returning, therefore I'll check for that. Make sure you think through what do you expect it to return and make sure it does return that, and check for all those edge cases. Okay? Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.